Arrest me, I dare you. He had ordered the deaths of 31 men. He had never, not once, offered any of them tea. She was about to find out which category she fell into. The elevator was a trap. Zara Mensah knew it the way she knew everything. Fast, quiet, and slightly ahead of everyone else in the room. The lobby of Kang Tower smelled like money and marble and the particular brand of arrogance that came from owning half of Seoul skyline. The receptionist had smiled too wide when Zara walked in. The security guard near the elevator had shifted his weight 2 seconds too early. Amateur. Zara smiled back at the receptionist, walked straight past the elevator, found the stairwell door behind a pillar disguised as a wall panel, because of course it was, and started climbing. 42 floors. In 3-inch boots. I am going to invoice Interpol for a full body massage, she thought, taking the stairs 2 at a time, badge clipped to her blazer, one hand near the holster under her arm. And a new pair of feet. Her earpiece crackled. Her handler, Agent Briggs, a man who had the energy of a disappointed PE teacher at all times, spoke directly into her skull. Mensah, your heart rate is elevated. I'm climbing 42 floors, Briggs. The plan was the elevator. The elevator had 3 of his men in it. Silence. How do you know that? The lobby guard blinked twice when I walked past it. She rounded floor 12, breathing controlled, thighs screaming. People only do that when they're confirming something to someone. Basic field reading. Did they skip that module when you were trained or? Mensah. Joking. Mostly. You have 40 seconds before your cover. 38. I'm aware. She hit floor 20. Stop counting, you're making me anxious. You don't get anxious. First time for everything. She wasn't anxious. She was something sharper than anxious, the electric, knife-edge feeling of a plan meeting reality and refusing to flinch. 8 months. 8 months of dead ends, ghost accounts, shipping containers with falsified manifests crossing the Yellow Sea. 8 months of Kang Min-joon being the name at the center of every web she untangled, and every time she pulled the thread, it led back to him, and every time it led back to him, the evidence was just clean enough. Just barely clean enough. Like someone was very good at their job. Like he was doing it himself. Floor 35. Her calves were filing a formal complaint. Floor 39. She fixed her blazer. Floor 42. Zara stopped. Breathed once. Squared her shoulders. She kicked open the stairwell door. The room was large, cold, and full of men who looked at her the way wolves look at something that wandered too close, not with alarm, but with the slow, lazy confidence of predators who hadn't decided yet if the effort was worth it. 10 of them. Maybe 12. Suits that cost more than her monthly salary. Faces that had seen things they'd never testify to. And at the head of a long obsidian table, seated with the particular stillness of a man who has never once in his life been in a hurry. Kang Min-joon. Zara had seen photographs. Photographs did not cover it. He was tall even sitting down, the kind of tall that reorganized a room around itself. Sharp jaw, sharper eyes, dark and still as deep water. He was in a black suit with no tie, top button open, and he was swirling a glass of water, with the slow, idle focus of someone who had been expecting her and had used the wait to become even more insufferably composed. He looked at her. She looked at him. The room held its breath. Agent Mensah, he said. His voice was low, textured, the kind of voice that was never raised because it never needed to be. You're 9 minutes late. I took the stairs. I know. 42 floors. The faintest movement at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The idea of a smile, kept on a very short leash. I had my chef prepare tea. It's gone cold. Someone in the room, one of the younger men near the wall, made the catastrophic mistake of snickering. Zara turned and looked at him. He stopped. She turned back to Min-joon, unclipped her badge with one hand and held it up. Kang Min-joon. I am Agent Zara Mensah, Interpol. You are under arrest for coordinating the illegal trafficking of. Sit down. Controlled substances across the maritime borders of. Sit. Down. South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, and for the falsification of. Min-joon stood up. The rest of the sentence evaporated. It wasn't that he moved aggressively. He didn't. He simply stood, and the act of it, the slow, controlled unfolding of him to his full height, rearranged the air in the room. Every man at the table straightened. The ones near the walls became very interested in their own shoes. He walked toward her. Slow. Hands in his pockets. Like he was taking a morning stroll. Like there were not 12 armed men behind him and one armed woman in front of him and approximately 400 volts of tension in the space between. He stopped 2 feet away. Up close, he was, and Zara made a very professional, very clinical note of this, absurdly good-looking. High cheekbones. A small scar cutting through his left brow that somehow made his entire face more annoying. Eyes so dark and still they made you feel like you were the one being investigated. You have no warrant, he said quietly. That holds in Korean jurisdiction. I'm working on it. You have no backup. I work better alone. You took the stairs in heels. They're boots, actually. And my ankles are fine, thanks for asking. Something shifted behind his eyes. Quick. Gone before she could name it. You're funny, he said. He didn't sound amused. He sounded curious. Like she was a lock he hadn't seen before and he was deciding which approach to take. I'm also serious, she said. The handcuffs aren't decorative. She reached for them. Turn around. The room erupted. Not violently. It was more of a collective inhale. A dozen men going very still the way things go still before they move. Chairs shifted. Hands disappeared under jackets. The entire atmosphere compressed into something tight and loaded, and Zara tracked all of it in her peripheral vision without moving her eyes from Minjun's face. Minjun raised one hand. Everything stopped. He looked at the handcuffs. Then at her. Where, he said, very carefully, did you plan to take me? Headquarters. Processing. Then a cell. In whose vehicle? I was going to call a cab. Silence. Then, and this, Zara would think about later, was the most destabilizing thing that happened in that entire room. Kang Min-jun pressed his lips together, and his shoulders moved, just slightly, with something that in any other man in any other context she would have called a suppressed laugh. He turned away from her before she could be sure. Escort Agent Mensah out, he said. Gently. She was in the street in 45 seconds. Not arrested. Not hurt. Not even threatened. 2 of his men, enormous, silent, professionally polite, had walked her to a side exit with the quiet efficiency of a hotel concierge removing an over-enthusiastic guest. One of them had even held the door. The Seoul night hit her, cold, bright, the street humming with traffic and street food smoke and the ordinary noise of a city that had no idea what went on 42 floors above it. Zara stood on the pavement, straightened her blazer, stared up at the glass tower. Briggs was already in her ear. That went. Don't. You didn't even get to finish reading the charges. I'm aware, Briggs. He sent you out in a lift. Side exit, actually. One of them held the door. She exhaled through her nose. He's smart. He knew my warrant wouldn't hold. He knew I had no backup. He could have. She stopped. Could have done a lot of things. Didn't. Why? Mensah. Komein. We'll reassess. I'm reassessing right now, she said, eyes still on the building. From here. She pulled out her earpiece. Put it in her pocket. Stood in the rain that had started without her noticing, because she was thinking about a man who had looked at her, really looked at her, the way nobody in that building looked at anything except a threat assessment. Like she was interesting. Like she was a problem. But an interesting one. Good, she thought. Let him think that. Upstairs, 42 floors above the rain, Kang Min-jun stood at his floor-to-ceiling window and watched the small figure of Zara Mensah on the pavement below. Coat dark, posture straight, completely still in the middle of foot traffic and rain like the city was moving around her instead of through her. She wasn't leaving. She was thinking. He watched her pull out her earpiece and pocket it, and something in his chest did something he did not have an immediately available explanation for. Day appeared at his shoulder. His second-in-command was 34 years old, had the face of someone's favorite uncle, and was precisely as dangerous as Min-jun, just louder about it. He looked at the window. Then at Min-jun's face. Then back at the window. She's still standing there, Day said. Yes. In the rain. Yes. She tried to arrest you with no warrant, no backup, and a plan to call a cab. Yes. Day considered this. Most people who come in here without enough backup don't walk out. She's not most people. Boss. Day lowered his voice. We don't know who sent her. If Interpol has eyes on. She came alone because Interpol didn't send her. Min-jun turned from the window, picked up his glass of cold water. She came alone because she decided to. Those are different things. How do you know that? Because an authorized operation doesn't take the stairs to avoid an ambush and then ask for a cab, Min-jun said flatly. That's someone operating on instinct and personal conviction. She's been chasing me. He paused. For a while. That's not exactly reassuring. No. Min-jun looked at the window one more time. The figure on the pavement was gone. Find out everything. Family. History. How long she's been building a case and what she has. Who she talks to. Where she sleeps. Day pulled out his tablet. And then. Bring me the file. He set down his glass. I'll read it myself. Day nodded. Turned to go. Day. He stopped. She takes her coffee. Min-jun paused. Frowned slightly, like he'd surprised himself. Find out how she takes her coffee. Day very carefully kept his face neutral. This was a skill he had developed over 11 years of working for a man who noticed everything and tolerated very little, and he exercised it now with absolute commitment. The coffee, he said. The coffee. Of the Interpol agent who just tried to arrest you. Is there another coffee I'm referring to? No, sir. Day wrote it down. The coffee. Absolutely. He left. Min-jun turned back to the dark window. His own reflection looked back at him, sharp-jawed, still-eyed, the face of a man who had built a kingdom on ice and ruled it just as coldly. He pressed 2 fingers to his chest. That feeling again. Warm. Inconvenient. He hadn't felt it in 7 years. He examined it the way a scientist examines an anomaly, not with feeling, but with precision. What is this? Where did it come from? What does it want? Outside, the rain fell on Seoul, and 42 floors below, the most inconvenient woman he had ever met was somewhere in it, already planning her next move. He almost smiled. Let her, he thought. Let her plan. Zara Mensah stood under the awning of a convenience store 3 blocks from Kang Tower, eating a hot dog she'd bought because she hadn't eaten since morning and her pride had a caloric limit. She pulled out a small notebook. Old habit. She didn't trust phones for real thoughts. She wrote. He let me go. She stared at it. He let me go and he made sure I was escorted gently and one of his men held the door and he had a chef make tea. She took a bite of hot dog. He is either the most dangerous man I've ever walked into a room with, or the most dangerous man I've ever walked into a room with who has inexplicably good manners. She flipped to a new page. Why did he let me go? Options. Rapid fire. The way her brain worked. Linear. Fast. No room for noise. 1. He didn't see her as a threat. Possible. Annoying. 2. He was buying time to find out what she had. Likely. 3. He wanted her to come back. She stopped on this one longer than she meant to. She closed the notebook. Finished the hot dog. Looked up at the tower, all glass and light against the dark Seoul sky, Kang Min-jun somewhere at the top of it like a king who decided gravity was optional. All right, she said, to nobody, to herself, to the case that had swallowed 8 months of her life. Round 2. She put her earpiece back in. Briggs nearly choked. Mensah, where have you been? I've been eating, she said. Brief me on everything we have on the shipping route through Incheon. I need to find a different angle. You're not coming in. I'm going to need a better warrant, a better plan, and possibly better boots. She turned up her collar against the rain. So no, I'm not coming in. Director Park is going to. Tell Director Park I said hi. She started walking. And Briggs. What? Next time you put me in a building with a compromised elevator, I'm invoicing you personally for the stairs. The deal he shouldn't have made. He had her coffee order in under 6 hours. Oat milk. 2 sugars. Extra shot. He read it, set the file down, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was 22 years old. Inconveniently, embarrassingly, dangerously, interested. The file arrived at 3 a.m. Min Jun was still awake. He was always still awake at 3 a.m. Sleep was something he did out of biological obligation, briefly, between 4 and 7, like a subscription service he hadn't gotten around to cancelling. He sat at the desk in his private office, not the boardroom, the real one, with the bookshelves and the bad lamp and the framed photograph of his brother he never moved and never discussed, and he read. He read it once, fast, the way he processed everything, total absorption, zero expression. Then he read it again. Agansara ama mensa. 26. Ghanaian British. Mother a retired professor of linguistics, University of Ghana. Father a retired London Metropolitan Police Sergeant, hence, probably, the complete immunity to intimidation. Top of her Interpol cohort. 3 commendations in 4 years. Fluent in English, Chi, French, and... He stopped here. Conversational Korean. He looked up from the file. Looked at nothing. Conversational Korean. She had stood in his boardroom and let him speak to his men in Korean, had let every instruction, every assessment, every quiet dismissal pass over her head with the blank expression of someone who didn't understand, and she had understood every single word. Min Jun pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. He was annoyed. He recognized the feeling because it was familiar, clean, and manageable. The other feeling, the one underneath the annoyance, warm and persistent and entirely unwelcome, was less familiar and therefore more dangerous. He turned the page. Current operation, and sanctioned. Agent Mensah filed for an authorized operation 8 months ago. Request denied, insufficient evidence, diplomatic sensitivity. Agent Mensah proceeded independently. Current status, operating outside Interpol mandate. She came after me, he thought, alone, on her own conviction, with no backup and no authorization, because she decided it was the right thing to do. He closed the file. Stood up. Walked to the window. Seoul glittered below him, indifferent and gorgeous, the Han River catching city light like it was showing off. Somewhere in this city, Zara Mensah was in a safe house that his intelligence team had already located. A second-floor walk-up in Mapo-gu, rented under a civilian alias, 3 exits, 2 of which she'd almost certainly already mapped. Smart girl, he thought, for the second time in one night. It was becoming a habit. He picked up his phone. Zara's safe house smelled like instant noodles and the specific despair of a woman who had been awake for 22 hours staring at a wall of evidence that was legally inadmissible in 3 jurisdictions. She had photographs. She had shipping manifests. She had ghost account trails that dissolved into shell companies the moment you pulled them. She had 8 months of work that amounted to the world's most detailed portrait of a crime she couldn't yet prove. She also had, inexplicably, the business card of a man she was supposed to be arresting, which one of his silent, polite bodyguards had slipped into her coat pocket on the way out of the building. She'd found it at midnight. She'd been staring at it for 3 hours. It was matte black. Just a number. No name. As if the name was so well known it didn't require the reminder. The audacity, she thought. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered before it rang twice, and then immediately wanted to retroactively make herself wait longer because she was a professional and professionals did not answer unknown numbers on the first ring like they'd been hoping for the call. I have a proposition, said the voice. She recognized it instantly. Low, smooth, textured like expensive fabric. The kind of voice that made you sit up straighter for reasons you were unwilling to examine. I know who this is, she said. Good. Then we can skip introductions. How did you get this number? The same way I got your coffee order. A pause. Oat milk. 2 sugars. Extra shot. Zara stared at the wall. She was going to have a very firm conversation with Briggs about operational security. After this call. Because she was absolutely, definitely, 100% not continuing this conversation. I'm listening, she said. He chose a pojangmaka, a street food tent, orange-lit and steaming, tucked between a pharmacy and a karaoke bar in Mapo-gu. The kind of place that was crowded at midnight because Seoul never really stopped. University students and office workers and people who needed tteokbokki the way other cities needed therapy, all packed under orange canvas in the cold. He was already there when she arrived. Black cap. Face mask pulled down to his chin. A padded jacket that cost more than the tent's monthly rent but was doing its level best to look ordinary. He'd chosen the corner seat, back to the wall, one clear sightline to the entrance and 2 exits within 8 steps. She clocked all of this in the time it took her to walk from the entrance to his table. She sat down. He had ordered food she hadn't asked for. Tteokbokki, steaming and red. Earmuck skewers. 2 paper cups of something hot. I didn't say yes to dinner, she said. You hadn't eaten. He said it simply, like it was information rather than consideration. Your safe house has 3 instant noodle packets on the counter and nothing else. Zara went very still. You've been inside my safe house. No. His eyes met hers, direct, calm, that dark water stillness. I've seen the grocery receipts from the store at the corner. You've bought nothing but instant noodles and bottled water for 2 weeks. A pause. It's a bad diet for someone working this many hours. Are you? She stopped. Blinked. Are you concerned about my nutrition? I'm observant. You're surveilling me. I'm assessing a potential partner. The word landed carefully. She let it sit for a second before she picked it up. Partner, she repeated. There's a problem inside my organization. He set down his cup. No preamble, no performance, just the flat directness of a man who had decided to say a thing and was saying it. Someone is moving product I didn't authorize. That's generally how criminal enterprises work. Not mine. His voice didn't change, but something in it went very precise. I run a controlled operation, Agent Mensa. Every shipment, every contract, every account. I know about it, or it doesn't happen. That's not arrogance. That's architecture. He paused. Someone has been using my infrastructure, my routes, my contacts, without my knowledge. For what? He held her gaze. Children, he said. The word dropped into the space between them like something heavy and cold, and Zara felt the shift in the conversation the way you feel a temperature change, abrupt, total, impossible to ignore. You're telling me, she said slowly, that someone in your organization is trafficking children through your networks, and you want me to believe you didn't know. I want you to help me find who it is. And then I handle it. That's not justice. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's faster, and it's certain, and the person responsible will spend significantly longer suffering than they would in your legal system. He said it without heat, without relish, just the cold, level statement of a man who had made calculations and was comfortable with the results. You can be morally outraged about that after we stop it. Zara looked at him. At the stillness of him. At the way his jaw was set and his eyes hadn't moved from hers, and there was something underneath the composure that wasn't calm at all. It was fury, so controlled it was almost invisible. Almost. Why not handle it yourself? She said. You clearly have the resources. Because whoever is doing this is careful. They've covered their tracks inside my systems, which means they know my systems. He reached into his jacket and set a drive on the table between them. This contains everything you've been looking for. Every name, every route, every account connected to the trafficking network you've been chasing for 2 years. Documented. Evidenced. Prosecutable. He kept his hand on it. In exchange, you use your Interpol access to help me identify the person inside my organization. Your databases, your forensics, your ability to trace the chain without tripping the same internal wires I would. She looked at the drive. She looked at him. You're asking me, she said, to work with the man I just tried to arrest. You tried to arrest me with handcuffs and a cab plan. The bar for working together can only be higher. Again, that almost smile. That leashed, controlled thing that wasn't quite amusement but was something adjacent to it. I'll buy you more tteokbokki. I don't want tteokbokki. You've eaten 6 pieces since you sat down. Zara looked down. She had, in fact, eaten 6 pieces of tteokbokki. She looked back up. He was watching her with those still, dark eyes, and there was something in them that was very close to. She couldn't call it warmth, exactly. It was more like recognition. Like a man who was very good at reading rooms and very unused to rooms that read back, and he was deciding what to do about it. She picked up the 7th piece of tteokbokki. I have conditions, she said. I expected you would. I report to no one inside your organization. I work alone, parallel to you, and I share what I find when I find it. Not before. Agreed. If I find evidence of anything else, anything that goes beyond what you've described, I act on it. Reasonable. And if this is a setup, she leaned forward slightly. If this is a play to find out what Interpol has on you, or to expose my sources, or to get me close enough to neutralize the problem I represent, she let the sentence land. I will make your life so comprehensively, so specifically, so creatively complicated that you will think back on tonight and genuinely mourn the moment you dialed my number. Silence. He looked at her. The kind of looking that wasn't passive, that was active, deliberate, like he was taking something apart to see how it worked and finding it more intricate than he'd expected. I believe you, he said. Good. Do you believe me? She considered him. The fury underneath the stillness. The children, he'd said with his jaw set like that. The drive on the table, which she already knew, from 8 months of working this case, contained information she couldn't get anywhere else. Not entirely, she said. But enough. She took the drive. 2 hours later, they were still there. The Pojangmaka vendor had started giving them looks, the kind a small business owner gave 2 people who had been occupying a corner table for 120 minutes, ordered twice, and was still deep in conversation with the focused intensity of people trying to solve an equation. Minjun had ordered more food twice without asking her. Both times it had been exactly what she would have chosen. She was trying very hard not to think about that. The Incheon route, she said, spreading a hand-drawn map across the table. She didn't put real documents in places she hadn't swept, another thing he noticed and noted. The manifests I have show a pattern of deviation every 3rd shipment. Someone is using the standard route as cover for a secondary one. The deviation occurs between Incheon and the Pyeongtaek port facility. He tapped a point on her map, precise and immediate, like he'd been thinking about the same route. I noticed a discrepancy 3 months ago. I assumed it was an accounting error. It's not. I know that now. They looked at the map at the same time, and they were close, closer than a boardroom table had allowed, closer than the polite distance of 2 adversaries, and Zara was aware of it the way you're aware of weather changing. Not dramatic. Just present. He smelled like cedarwood and cold air and something underneath that she didn't have a name for, which was irritating, because she had a name for everything. The person you're looking for, she said, keeping her voice professionally level, has been doing this for between 8 and 14 months. The deviation pattern starts small, negligible, and escalates. They tested your systems first. She looked up. They were patient. Patience requires either discipline or obsession. His eyes were on the map. I'll know which when I find them. What do you do, she said, before she decided to, when you find someone who's betrayed you? He was quiet for a moment. Depends on who it is, he said. And what they cost. And if it's someone close. He looked at her then, really looked, the way he had in the boardroom when everything else had been performance and this was something different. Something stripped of the theater. Then it costs more, he said. Everything that's worth anything does. Zara held his gaze for exactly 1 second longer than was strategically advisable. She looked back at the map. I'll need 48 hours to run the account traces through Interpol systems without flagging my access. You'll have whatever you need. I work alone. I know. I don't report to you. I know. And if you show up unannounced at my safe house, I won't. I'm serious. I will handcuff you to a radiator. He blinked. Once. That's a specific threat. I have specific handcuffs. She gathered her notes. We'll be in touch. She stood, shrugged on her coat, picked up the last earmark skewer because she'd paid for it emotionally if not financially, and she was not leaving it behind. Mensa. She stopped. Didn't turn around. His voice was quiet. Not soft. Minjun was never soft, but something that had the texture of care, sanded down to its most functional shape. Be careful with what you find, he said. Not all of it will be comfortable. She turned her head, just slightly. Enough to catch him in her peripheral vision, sitting in that corner, cap low, watching her with that still, serious face that had no business being as compelling as it was. I'm always careful, she said. No, he said. You're always right. Those are different things. She left. The night was cold and the street was loud and she ate the earmark skewer standing on the pavement outside because she was a grown adult who made excellent professional decisions, and she did not look back at the tent. She didn't need to look back. She could still feel him watching. Inside, Minjun sat alone while the vendor pointedly began wiping the table next to him. Day materialized from absolutely nowhere, a talent that had taken years to develop and that Minjun found useful approximately 90% of the time and deeply irritating the other 10. She left, Day said. I have eyes. She took the last earmark skewer. I know. You ordered it for her. Day. I'm just noting the sequence of events. Day sat down in the chair Zara had vacated. It was still warm. He clocked this immediately, decided his life expectancy was better served by not mentioning it, and kept his face neutral. How did it go? She took the drive. So she agreed. She agreed to the parts she could justify to herself. Minjun looked at the table, at the map she'd taken, at the paper cups, at the small, specific, organized chaos of a woman who thought in systems. She'll agree to the rest when she finds what's on that drive. And if she finds more than we wanted her to find, she'll find exactly what's there. He paused. I don't hide things from people I'm working with. Day absorbed this. Then, very carefully, you're working with the Interpol agent who tried to arrest you this morning. Yes. With a cab. Day. I just want to make sure I've understood the situation correctly. You've understood it. Leave it. Absolutely. Day stood, straightened his jacket, made it approximately 3 steps before his self-preservation instinct staged a brief, losing battle with his curiosity. He turned back. Boss. Minjun looked up. She ate everything you ordered. I know. You ordered her favorites. I read her file. The file listed her coffee order, not her. Day stopped. Recalculated. You read her file and you extrapolated her food preferences. Silence. Get the car, Minjun said. Getting the car, said Day, and left quickly, and waited until he was at least a full block away before he allowed his face to do what it had been desperately trying to do for the last 10 minutes, which was grin like an idiot. Zara's safe house felt different when she got back to it. She couldn't explain that. It was the same 4 walls, same evidence board, same 3 instant noodle packets on the counter that were now a source of mild personal embarrassment. She stood in the middle of the room with her coat still on and looked at the wall of photographs and shipping routes and ghost accounts. She looked at the drive in her hand. She looked at her notebook. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote, fast, the way she always thought, linear, no room for noise. He's telling the truth about not knowing. Gut. Trust it. The fury when he said children, that's not performance. You can't fake that specific kind of quiet. He ordered my food without asking and got it right. Twice. She paused. Wrote. That's not relevant. She looked at it. Crossed it out. Wrote it again. He is working this case from the inside with no sanctioned support and real personal risk, and he came to the one person trying to bring him down because she was the only one he thought was actually trying to stop it. Pause. That's either the most genuine thing anyone has ever done or the most sophisticated manipulation I've ever encountered. Pause. The problem is, both of those things make him more interesting. She closed the notebook. Plugged in the drive. The files opened. Layered, meticulous, devastating in their detail. Names she'd been chasing for 2 years. Routes she'd mapped half of and now saw completed. Account chains that finally connected to something prosecutable. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. 8 months. This was 8 months of work, on his side, without anyone knowing. Who are you, she thought, really? Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it fast, still wired, still running, and looked at the screen. Unknown number. A text. 3 words. Oat milk. Refrigerator. She stared at it. Got up. Opened the refrigerator that had been empty when she left. Inside, a single cup of coffee, sealed, from the Korean artisan cafe 3 blocks away that she'd looked at through the window exactly once, 2 weeks ago, and decided was too expensive. Oat milk. 2 sugars. Extra shot. Still warm. Zara stood at her open refrigerator at 2 a.m. in a safe house in Mapo-gu holding a coffee she hadn't ordered, paid for, or in any way requested, and felt something happen in her chest that she had absolutely no protocol for. She was going to be a complete professional about this. She sat down at her desk, opened the drive files, and got to work. She drank every last drop of the coffee. E&D. She found the name at 4:17 a.m. She stared at it for 11 minutes. Then she picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again, and said out loud, to an empty room, in 3 languages, every word her mother had specifically told her never to say. Then she called him. Asterisk. The name was Shin Yoon-hak, Min Jun's treasurer. 12 years. The man who had sat at his right hand through 2 hostile takeovers, 3 assassination attempts, and the night Min Jun buried his brother. The man who sent fruit baskets to Min Jun's housekeeper on her birthday because Min Jun had mentioned, once, that she liked persimmons. Zara had his entire financial architecture mapped across her floor in printed sheets because her laptop screen was not big enough for the scale of the betrayal. The deviation pattern. The ghost sub-accounts. The layered shell routing that looked from inside exactly like Min Jun's own methodology. Because it was his methodology. Because Shin Yoon-hak had watched him build it for 12 years and had copied it with the precision of a man who knew every blind spot in the system because he had helped design them. Patient, she had told Min Jun at the Pojamika. Patient did not cover it. This was surgical. This was intimate. This was someone who knew exactly where to stand to stay out of the light. She called him at 4:28 a.m. He answered on the first ring. I have the name. Silence. Then, come to the Hannam office. Now. It's 4 a.m. I know what time it is. I'm not going to your office at 4 a.m., Min Jun. Zara. He had never used her first name before. She picked up her coat. Asterisk. The Hannam office was different from Kang Tower. Smaller. Private. A converted upper floor of a building that did not have his name on it, which meant it was the one he actually used. No reception desk. No marble. Bookshelves on every wall, a large work table buried under documents, and the kind of organized chaos that belonged to a man who thought faster than filing systems could keep up with. It smelled like cedarwood and black coffee and the specific tension of a room that had held too many serious conversations. Min Jun was already there. He had not slept, she could tell from the set of his shoulders and the fact that he was on his 4th coffee based on the cups. He had taken off his jacket. First time she had seen that. He was in a black dress shirt, sleeves folded to the elbow, and he looked up when she walked in with the expression of a man who had been calculating since the moment she called and had not arrived at a number he liked. Tell me, he said. No hello. No preamble. Just, tell me. She laid the printed sheets on his work table. He looked at them the way he looked at everything, total, immediate absorption. She watched his face as he read. Watched the exact moment he hit the name. His jaw set. That was all. No outburst. No movement. Just that jaw, and the stillness underneath going from controlled to something else entirely. Something that was working very hard to stay contained. Yoon-hak, he said. Flat. Quiet. 12 months of deviation. 14 confirmed shipments. He used a routing method that mirrors your own close enough that any internal audit would read it as standard procedure. He would have been invisible indefinitely if the pattern had not started accelerating. Why did it accelerate? Because he got greedy. Or scared. Or both. She pointed to a cluster of accounts on the rightmost sheet. 3 months ago he started liquidating. Small amounts. He's been building an exit. Min Jun was very still. He's planning to run, he said. He's planning to run, she confirmed. The silence that followed was the loudest she had ever heard. She watched him process it, watched the years of it move through him. 12 years of proximity and trust, and something she understood now was as close to friendship as a man like Kang Min Jun allowed himself. She watched him decide, in real time, what to do with that. He picked up one of the sheets. Set it down. Picked up his coffee. Set that down too. How long have you known? He said. 3 hours. I called you the moment I confirmed it. He looked at her. You did not have to do that, he said. You could have taken this to Interpol. Yoon-hak connected to my network, that is leverage. That is a case. I told you what I found, she said simply. That's the deal. This is more than the deal. Don't make it complicated. It's already. Min Jun. She said his name the same way he had said hers on the phone, flat, direct, a full stop in human form. We can discuss the philosophical implications of me not immediately betraying you later. Right now we have a problem. He is accelerating his exit. If we do not move first, We move tonight, he said. I need 24 hours to get Interpol positioned. We do not have 24 hours. He turned to the window. The Han River was dark and silver below, pre-dawn and quiet. If Yoonhak is running, the next shipment is already staged. He will not wait. Zara looked at the sheets. Looked at him. He was right. She hated that. Fine, she said. Tonight. You handle the internal network. I take the documentation directly to my Interpol contact. Simultaneously. Clean and prosecutable. Agreed. And Yoonhak is mine. She opened her mouth. Within legal limits, he said, before she could speak. I know your conditions. I'm just making sure you remember them. I remember everything you say. He said it simply, without edge, and it landed with the quiet weight of something he had not intended to reveal. He turned back to the table. We start at 10 p.m. I need your laptop. Absolutely not. Then sit next to me and run it yourself. She sat next to him. They worked for 4 hours straight. It should have been tense. Miserable. The kind of grinding, coffee-soaked operational planning that felt like homework with higher stakes. Instead it was, and Zara made several unsuccessful attempts not to notice this, the most natural 4 hours she had spent with another human being in longer than she could comfortably remember. He thought the way she thought. Not identically, his instincts went to leverage and containment where hers went to evidence and prosecution. But the underlying architecture was the same. Fast. Lateral. No motion. He caught a gap in her timeline before she spotted it. She caught a flaw in his containment approach before he did. Back and forth, no ego, just the work, and underneath the work, the constant low-level awareness of proximity that she was categorically refusing to name. At one point she reached across him to move a document and his hand was already on it, and they both stopped for exactly half a second close, the cedarwood and cold air of him right there, his eyes dropping to her hand on the paper and then coming back up to her face, and then they both continued as if nothing had happened, which was the most obvious possible confirmation that something had. The secondary exit route, she said, pointing at the map. Her voice was perfectly steady. Professionally steady. Covered. I will have Park and 2 others on it. Good. Good. They did not look at each other. Your coffee is cold, he said, after a moment. I'm aware. There is a fresh pot. I know where the coffee is, Min-jun. I have been in this room for 4 hours. He got up, poured her a fresh cup, placed it in front of her without commentary, and sat back down. She did not say thank you. He did not ask for it. They both understood that entire conversation perfectly. Asterisk. At 8 a.m., Day arrived. He walked in, clocked the 2 of them at the work table surrounded by documents and cold coffee cups, looked at Min-jun's folded sleeves and then at Zara's coat still on the back of the chair like she had never quite committed to being comfortable, and achieved the facial expression of a man assembling a puzzle with great personal satisfaction. You have been here all night, he said. We have been working, Min-jun said. Right. Day set down the breakfast he had brought 2 containers, because of course he had known, and surveyed the table. Did you sleep? No. Did she sleep? Min-jun looked at Zara. Zara looked at Min-jun. We have been working, she said. Right, said Day again, with the tone of a man who was going to have a lot to say about this to himself later. He opened the containers. Rice, soup, the kind of solid, no-nonsense breakfast that said someone had been awake all night and needed real food. He placed Zara's portion in front of her first. She blinked. How did you know my? Boss told me, Day said. Zara looked at Min-jun. Min-jun was reading a document with deep concentration. The kimchi ratio, she said slowly. And the soft tofu instead of firm. Boss told me, Day said again, pleasantly. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago Min-jun had not known she existed. She looked at him. He was still reading the document with the focused energy of a man who was absolutely not aware of this conversation. Min-jun, she said. You researched my food preferences 3 weeks ago. I research all relevant parties. I was not a relevant party 3 weeks ago. He turned a page. Min-jun. The Yangchen confirmation. We need to move on that before. Kang Min-jun. He looked up. She tilted her head. He held her gaze for 2 seconds with the stillness of a man who was very committed to the position that this was a perfectly normal thing to have done, and then something in his expression shifted just slightly, just at the edges, into something that was less composed and more human and entirely, dangerously, compelling. "Eat your breakfast," he said quietly. She ate her breakfast. Day took himself to the other side of the room and communed silently with his own food and his own feelings, like a man who deserved a medal and was not going to receive one. Asterisk. The day moved fast after that. Confirmation of the Yangchun warehouse. 11 a.m. Min Jun was right, the shipment was staged. 12 containers, falsified manifests, moving at midnight under a port authority clearance that had Yoon-hak's fingerprints all over it once you knew what to look for. Zara got it to her Interpol contact at 2 p.m. Agent Seo, Seoul-based, 3 years building this exact case. Seo's response was 4 seconds of silence followed by, "Mensa. How did you get this?" "Fieldwork," Zara said. "This is 8 months of my 2 years of mine. Brief you fully after. Right now I need a maritime intercept team by 11 p.m. and I need it quiet." "Done," said Seo, in the tone of someone who would be asking many questions later. Min Jun's team was in position by 9 p.m. By 9:45, they had a problem. Asterisk. The call came through on Min Jun's encrypted line. One of his men at the warehouse perimeter voice flat, controlled, the particular register of someone delivering information they knew was bad. Yoon-hak had moved early. Not midnight. 10 p.m., and he had brought company 8 men who were not his usual associates, who had the specific, coordinated movement of people hired for a job that ended with no witnesses. They were not coming for the shipment. They were coming for Min Jun. Someone had told Yoon-hak that Min Jun knew. Asterisk. "The parking garage," Min Jun said, "already moving. He will try to cut the route between here and—" "I know." Zara was already checking her holster. "I mapped the building exits when I arrived." He looked at her. "Of course you did." "We split up." "We do not split up." Min Jun. "We do not split up, Zara." His voice was quiet but absolute. "That is not negotiable." She held his gaze for half a second. Nodded once. They moved. Asterisk. The parking garage was 3 floors, poor lighting, too many concrete columns, the kind of space that turned an ambush into a chess match. Min Jun went in knowing this. Zara went in knowing it and also knowing every exit because she had been doing this since she was 22 and paranoia was just preparedness with better marketing. The first contact came on level 2. 2 men, fast, moving in coordinated silence professionals, which meant this was going to be efficient and painful and over quickly one way or another. Zara took the one on the left. He was bigger than her by 30 kilos and had the confident stance of someone who had never once been surprised by a woman in a parking garage, which was his first and only mistake. She used that surprise exactly once, precisely, and he went down in 4 seconds in a way that suggested he would be rethinking several life assumptions when he regained consciousness. She turned. She turned. Min Jun's was already down. He rolled his shoulder, straightened his collar, and looked at her. She looked at him. "You good?" she said. "You broke his collarbone." I assessed the situation and responded proportionally. His collarbone. He was going to respond disproportionately. "Are you good?" "Yes." He moved toward the stairwell, then stopped, turned, stepped back to her and without announcement, without preamble, reached up and wiped a streak of something from a cheekbone with his thumb, quick and careful. The contact lasted 2 seconds. She forgot how to have a thought for approximately the same duration. "You had," he started. "I know," she said, because she needed to be the one who finished a sentence in this moment. "Right," he said. They went back to back on the stairwell. Asterisk. Level 3 was worse. 4 men this time, and Yoon-hak himself at the far end, a man Zara had seen only in surveillance photographs, middle-aged, conservative suit, the unremarkable face of someone who had spent 12 years learning to be invisible. He looked different in person. Smaller. Tighter. The specific diminishment of a man confronted with the consequences of what he had done. He looked at Min Jun. Min Jun looked at him. The 4 hired men were absolutely a variable in this situation and also somehow, for one arrested moment, entirely irrelevant to what was happening between those 2 sets of eyes. "How long?" Min Jun said. Yoon-hak did not pretend not to understand. 14 months. Why? A pause. Then, with the exhausted emptiness of someone who had been carrying something too heavy for too long. Because I could. And then because I could not stop. Minjun nodded. Once. Like he was filing it. The children, he said. Where are they? Warehouse 7. Yangchun. How many? 11. Minjun closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then, get them out, he said to Day, who appeared from the stairwell with 2 of his men because Day's talent for materializing in the right place at the right time extended, apparently, to crises. Warehouse 7. Now, take the Interpol contact number from Agent Mensah and call them in before you go through that door. Day was already moving. The hired men looked at each other. Looked at Yoonhak. Made the calculations that people make when the situation has shifted beneath their feet, and the money no longer covers the exposure. They put down the weapons with the careful, unanimous motion of a unanimous decision. Smart, Zara said. They ignored her. She preferred it that way. Yoonhak stood alone. Minjun walked toward him, slow, that morning stroll again, hands at his sides this time, no pockets. Yoonhak did not move. Did not run. Maybe he had known, on some level, that there was never going to be a version of this where he ran far enough. Minjun, Zara said. I remember your conditions, he said. She watched him. He stopped in front of Yoonhak. Said something low, in Korean, that she caught every word of and that she would not repeat because it was not for her, it was for 12 years and a specific, quiet, bilateral grief and a man who was going to have to live with having seen it for what it was. Then he stepped back. Agent Mensah, he said. He is yours. She was already moving forward with the handcuffs. Shin Yoonhak, she said, in Korean, because she had been in this country for 8 months and she was always prepared. You are under arrest. Behind her, she was almost certain she heard Minjun exhale. Asterisk. An hour later, Warehouse 7 was flooded with Interpol personnel and the children, 11 of them, terrified and exhausted and alive, were being taken somewhere warm and safe and far from the reaches of anything connected to this night. Zara stood at the warehouse entrance and watched the last vehicle leave and felt the particular kind of tired that came after something that actually mattered. Footsteps behind her. She knew the weight of them by now. 11, she said, without turning. They are all okay. I know. He stopped beside her. Looked at the empty road where the vehicles had been. Agent Seo called. She is requesting a full debrief. Tomorrow. She can have me tomorrow. Silence. You should go with them, he said. Your case is closed. You have Yoonhak, the network, the documentation. I know. There is nothing keeping you here. She turned her head and looked at him. The warehouse light was bad industrial, yellow, and it did nothing to make him look worse, which she found deeply unfair. He was looking at the road. Jaw set the way it was when he was deciding something. The scar through his brow catching the yellow light. Nothing, she said. He looked at her. She let him sit with that. Zara. You called me that first, she said. On the phone. At 4 a.m. You have been calling me Mensah ever since and trying very hard not to repeat it. I am aware of that. Are you going to tell me why? Because, he said, and stopped. He was never lost for words. She had noticed that, catalogued it, placed it on the list of things about him that were consistent and telling. When he spoke, it was deliberate. The pause was not searching for the word. The pause was deciding whether to say it. Because when I say your name, it stops sounding like information. The warehouse hummed. Sol murmured. The night stood very still. What does it sound like? She said. He looked at her with those dark, still eyes that she had read layer by layer across 2 weeks of proximity and danger and cold coffee and food ordered without asking. And she watched him make the decision, watched the man who controlled everything decide to let one thing go. Like something I am not supposed to have, he said. Zara Mensah, who had never in her professional life been without the next word, had no next word. She looked at him. He looked at her. The night did what nights do when 2 people are standing in the same charged, impossible, inevitable silence. It waited. She reached up, pressed 2 fingers to his chest right where he always pressed his own, that specific place, that habit she had noticed from the first night and never mentioned, and felt his breath stop. It sounds like that to me too, she said. For what it is worth. His hand came up and covered hers. Not moving. Not pulling her forward. Just covering. Warm. Steadying, like a man who was learning, carefully and for the first time in a long time, what it was to hold something without calculating its value. They stood like that for a moment that had no correct length. Then Zara cleared her throat. "I am still going to arrest you," she said. "Professionally speaking. Eventually." "I know," he said. "This does not change that." "I know. I am very serious." "I know you are." His thumb moved. Just once, across her knuckles. Barely there. "That is not the part that worries me." "What is the part that worries you?" "That you will be excellent at it," he said. Asterisk. Day found them 11 minutes later, standing 2 feet apart with the careful distance of people who had just retreated to professionalism and were committed to maintaining it for at least another 30 seconds. He took one look at Minjun's face. Then at Zara's face. Then at the 11 centimeters of charged, deliberate air between them. "The Interpol team is asking for the secondary documentation," he said, keeping his voice scrupulously, magnificently neutral. "And Agent Seo is requesting, boss, are you smiling?" Minjun was not smiling. He was doing the thing that was not a smile, that had never been a smile, that Zara had catalogued from the first night in the boardroom, that specific, controlled, leashed at the corner of the mouth thing. Except tonight it was about 2 degrees wider than she had ever seen it. "Secondary documentation is in the blue folder. On the work table." "Right. And Agent Mensah, your handler Briggs has called 4 times and is apparently absolutely losing it and would like to know if you are alive. Text him I'm alive. He wants to speak to you directly. Text him I'm alive but unavailable. He will want a reason. Tell him I'm following a lead." She looked at Minjun when she said it. Minjun looked back. Day read the room. Pocketed his phone. Squared his shoulders with the energy of a man who had been waiting a very long time for something and was being deeply professional about not celebrating it openly in a car park adjacent to a warehouse still full of Interpol agents. "I will tell him," he said. "I will just. Go do that. From over there." He pointed vaguely into the distance. "The folder. Blue. Work table. I will find it." He left with great efficiency. Got approximately 15 meters away. Pumped his fist once, silently, in the dark. Returned to professional bearing immediately. Asterisk. They drove back through Seoul at 2 a.m., the city washing past the windows in orange and neon, and Zara sat in the passenger seat of a car she had never agreed to get into with a man she had tried to arrest 48 hours ago, and felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt like she was exactly where the work had led her. Not safe. Not sensible. But right, in the way that only inconvenient things ever were. "Where are you taking me?" she said. "Your safe house." "I could have taken a cab." "You could have," he agreed. "You did not." She looked out the window. Neon Seoul. The Han River again. Always the Han River. Always catching the light. "You are going to be a problem," she said. "You have been a problem for 8 months. I am managing." She turned to look at him. He was watching the road. But the corner of his mouth was doing that thing. That thing. Zara Mensah, top of her Interpol cohort, 3 commendations, for languages. The woman who had walked into 42 floors of danger on pure conviction turned back to the window and quietly, privately, without any expression whatsoever, allowed herself to smile. They caught Junyo at 11:47 p.m. It took 9 minutes. Minjun said 4 words to him. Zara didn't hear them. She didn't need to. She heard the silence after. The specific, final silence of a door closing. On 19 years. And she stayed exactly where she was. On the other side of the wall. And waited for him. Because for the first time in 8 months, she wasn't moving toward the case. She was moving toward him. And that, she had finally decided, was the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. And she was doing it anyway. The operation had been clean. Clean was relative, of course. It involved 12 of Minjun's people, 2 of Zara's planted exits, a decoy shipment through Pyeongtaek that Junyo had moved to intercept, and Dae, who had been absolutely electric the entire evening and had at one point eaten a convenience store kimbap in the middle of a surveillance corridor with the focused serenity of a man for whom tension was simply a flavor of Tuesday. "You're eating," Zara had said, at 9 p.m. Both of them crouched behind a freight container with earpieces in and the cold harbor wind coming off the water. I function better with carbohydrates. He offered her a piece. You should eat. You always forget to eat. Minjun eats too little, she said. I eat at the wrong times. You eat constantly. How is this a functional team? We balance each other out. Day gestured philosophically with his kimbap. Like a nutritional ecosystem. That's not what that means. Agent Mensah. He gave her a look of immense patience. I have been second in command to a man who survives on water and controlled fury for 11 years. Let me have the kimbap. She took a piece. They ate in silence for 30 seconds while, somewhere across the harbor, 11 people moved into position. He's going to be okay, Day said. Quietly. No comedy in it. I know. He doesn't. Day stopped. Started again. He hasn't had anyone in a long time. Not really. Since his brother. I know, she said. He'd argue with me if I said that. I know that too. Day looked at her sideways. The look of a man who had been trying to work something out for 3 weeks and had just filed the last piece. You read him, he said. From the beginning. He doesn't let people do that. He let me. She put in her earpiece. He just doesn't know he did. Day made a small sound that was extremely eloquent for something technically inaudible, and went back to his kimbap. Junyo broke at 11:31 p.m. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He stood in the floodlights of Pyeongtaek port, coat open in the harbor wind, and looked at Minjun with the face of a man who had known, somewhere underneath everything, that this was always how it ended. Zara watched from 40 feet away through the scope of professional distance she'd maintained all night. Not her operation, not her call, not her jurisdiction. She was here as the architect of the trap, not the executioner. That was the agreement. She watched Minjun walk toward his oldest friend. She watched the 4 words. She couldn't hear them. She didn't try to. Some things weren't hers to witness. What she could see, from 40 feet and 3 weeks of learning to read him, the set of his shoulders going very tight and then, deliberately, releasing. The way he stood, not with the controlled fury of the man who'd heard the word children and gone quiet in a pojamaka at midnight. Something else. Something older. Something that had nothing to do with the Empire and everything to do with 17 years old and broke in Itaewon and the one person who'd been there then. It lasted 90 seconds. Then Minjun stepped back. Day moved forward. And Minjun turned and walked directly away from it all, coat moving with the harbor wind, face already closed and composed by the time he reached the shadows. He stopped next to her. Stood beside her in the dark. He didn't speak. She didn't either. This was the thing she'd learned about him. His silences had rooms in them. Furnished ones. You just had to know which door to open. She opened none of them. She just stood there, shoulder to shoulder with him in the cold, and let the silence be what it was. After a long time, he said, It's done. I know. The evidence is packaged for your Interpol contact. Everything you need to close your case. Prosecutable. Clean. I know. Day sent it an hour ago. A pause. Of course he did, Minjun said. And there it was, the faintest, most exhausted edge of something that wasn't quite warmth but was warmth's shadow. He's insufferable. He's devoted, she said. Same thing. She almost smiled. She felt him register it in the way he always did, in the micro-adjustment of his attention, that turning of the full beam of him toward her without actually turning his head. Mensah, he said. Minjun. It's over. She knew what he meant. Not the operation. Not Junyo. Not the case she'd been building for 8 months that was now packaged and clean and ready to end careers in 4 countries. This. Whatever wanted. What does Interpol do, he said slowly, with loose ends? Depends on the agent. And this agent. She looked at him. At the office she'd come to know, the lamp he wouldn't replace, the photograph, the water glass on the desk, the man who swirled it and ruled a city and felt everything 3 degrees quieter than anyone else and had still, somehow, felt enough to track her building cameras and stock her refrigerator and hold a handshake 2 seconds too long in the morning light on a rooftop. This agent, she said, is taking 2 weeks of personal leave effective immediately. Silence. 2 weeks, he said. Don't waste them. He unfolded from his chair. Slowly, the way he did everything, deliberate, certain, with the particular unhurried quality of a man who had decided something and was moving toward it without detour. He came around the desk, stopped in front of her. Closer than the pojamaka, closer than the rooftop, closer than every careful inch of maintained professional distance they'd been performing for 3 weeks. Up close, in the lamplight, the bad lamplight, the warm, terrible amber of his brother's lamp. His eyes had all their layers visible. Every degree of him. She had 43 days of learning what those layers were, and she could read them now like a language she'd been studying in secret. What she read was this: I have been alone in this room for a long time. And then you walked into my building and took the stairs in boots and threatened to call a cab, and I haven't been alone in it since, and I don't know what to do with that, and I'm going to figure it out. You're sure? He said. I'm always sure. You told me you're always right. That's different from Kang Min-jun, she said. I climbed 42 floors to arrest you with no warrant, no backup, and a plan to call a cab. I broke operational protocol to take a USB drive from a known criminal at midnight in a street food tent. I have been operating on gut instinct for 8 months in a city that isn't mine, and I have been right every time. She held his gaze. I'm sure, she said. He looked at her for one long, still, Min-jun-shaped moment. Then he smiled. Not the almost smile. Not the leashed, fractional, controlled edge of one. A real one, full and quiet and devastatingly, unfairly, completely genuine. The kind that took his entire face and rearranged it into something that no photograph had ever captured because he saved it, apparently, for empty offices at midnight and one specific person who had broken into his boardroom and threatened him with handcuffs. Zara Mensah, who had stood in 42 floors of stairs in boots and never flinched, who had taken down 3 men in a parking garage and called a managing, who had held an evidence file on the worst betrayal of a man's life and said your world just as better suits, felt her heart do something completely unprofessional. She decided she was fine with that. He reached out, slowly, giving her every moment to be sure, and tucked a loose braid back from her face. His hand stayed at her jaw. Warm. Certain. The hand she'd bandaged on a rooftop, the hands that had pressed a pocket square to her eyebrow in a parking garage, the hand she had been carefully not thinking about for 3 weeks. You're going to be extremely difficult, he said. Extremely, she agreed. You're going to argue with everything. Most things. You're going to continue investigating me. Obviously. And you're going to eat properly, he said. I'm not restocking that refrigerator with coffee alone. She laughed. It came out before she could be professional about it, warm and real and slightly surprised, because she hadn't expected it in this particular moment, and neither had he. She could tell from the way he looked at her when it happened, like she'd done something astonishing and ordinary at the same time. Deal, she said. He kissed her. Or she kissed him. Honestly, it was simultaneous, which was perhaps the most accurate thing that had ever happened between 2 people who were evenly, perfectly, infuriatingly matched, and it was warm and certain and unhurried, because Min-jun had never once in his life done anything without being completely sure of it, and she had never once in her life done anything halfway. The city moved below. Seoul, indifferent and blazing. The Han River catching light. The ordinary, extraordinary, ongoing noise of a city that had no idea that its most untouchable man was in a room with bad lighting and a photograph he'd never moved, being kissed by an Interpol agent who'd tried to arrest him 3 weeks ago with a cab plan. The lamp threw amber across everything. His brother's lamp. Good, Min-jun thought, somewhere beneath everything else. Good. Red heart. The door opened. They separated with the collective dignity of 2 people who had definitely known the door was about to open and had timed it perfectly. They had not timed it perfectly. Day stood in the doorway. He looked at Min-jun. He looked at Zara. He looked at the very specific 6 inches between them that had not existed 30 seconds ago. He looked at the wall. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the lamp. I have, he said, with immense care, the operational debrief. From tonight. Which I can leave. On the side table. And collect tomorrow. Thank you, Day, Min-jun said. Absolutely. He placed the file on the side table with the precision of a man diffusing something. Agent Mensah. Pleasure working with you. Likewise, she said. Professionally. I'm going to go now, Day said. Wonderful, said Min-jun. Into the hallway. Perfect. I'll close the door. Please. Completely closed. Both sides. All the way. Day. The door closed. From the other side, at a distance he considered sufficiently respectful and acoustically adequate, Day leaned against the wall, looked at the ceiling of the 42nd floor of Kang Tower, and allowed himself, finally, the full expression of everything he'd been containing for 3 weeks. He was going to need a moment. He pulled out his phone. Texted his wife. "Remember when I told you the boss would never let anyone in again?" She replied in 4 seconds. "Did someone prove you wrong?" Catastrophically, he typed. A pause. Then, "I told you. Pay up. You owe me dinner." Day stared at the ceiling. He owed his wife dinner. He was the happiest he'd been in 11 years. Later, much later, they were on the couch in the office because the chairs were impractical and the desk was a desk and the couch existed and neither of them had made a formal decision about it, which was, Zara reflected, exactly how everything between them had happened. She had her legs across his lap. He had one hand resting on her ankle with the unconscious, settled certainty of a man who had decided where things belonged and arranged them accordingly. His jacket was off. Her boots were off, finally, professionally, with great relief. The city was dark outside. 2 a.m. Seoul doing its quiet thing. "Tell me about your brother," she said. She'd wondered if he would. She'd asked it because she trusted the answer. Either way, either he would, which meant something, or he'd go quiet and she'd understand that too. He looked at the photograph on the shelf. "Jahoon," he said. "He was 20. A pause. "He was nothing like me. Loud. Laughed at everything. Terrible at math. He wanted to be a chef." The words came out measured, rationed, 3 degrees quieter than everything else, just as she described. "He died because of who I was becoming. Because of who I was choosing to be." His jaw tightened. "I finished what I was building. In his name. I told myself it was for him." Was it? No. Simple. Unflinching. It was because I didn't know what else to do with the grief and I was very good at building things. He looked at her. "It took me a long time to understand those aren't the same reason." She held his gaze. "He'd have liked you," Minjun said. "How do you know?" "Because you're exactly the kind of person who would have argued with him and made him better at something and then eaten all the food he cooked." The almost smile, but warmer. Different. He liked feeding people. "So do you," she said. "Apparently. I learned it from somewhere." The lamp hummed. The city breathed. She looked at the bad amber light and understood why he kept it. "I'm not going to stop investigating you," she said. "Not as a warning. As a fact. I know. The 2 weeks are personal leave. Not a professional position change. I know. Whatever this is. It's something," he said. Firmly. "I don't deal in vague. Whatever this is, it's something, and it's ours, and we'll build it the same way I build everything. Carefully, specifically, and with full knowledge of what we are working with." "That's very structural of you." "I'm a structural person." "Even autist." She reached up and turned off the bad lamp. The room went a city-light grey, Seoul glow coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, soft and silver and everywhere. "For the record," she said, in the dark, "I think you're the most interesting problem I've ever had." "Is that a compliment?" "From me? Absolutely." "Then I'll take it." His hand was warm and certain on her ankle. The city was silver. The lamp was off but the room wasn't dark. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks, she said. Mensa. Minjun. Go to sleep. You go to sleep. You sleep 4 hours a night like a discontinued robot. 3. Tonight I'm trying 4. You're going to try 4 hours of sleep. You're a positive influence. I tried to arrest you with a cab. And yet, he said, quietly, like it was the whole sentence, like it contained everything, the boardroom and the stairwell and the pojamaka and the rooftop and the refrigerator and the parking garage and the harbor and the lamp and the 2 seconds too long on a handshake. And yet, Zara Mensah, who had never in her life left a loose end unresolved, felt, for the first time in 8 months, like she was exactly where the evidence had been pointing all along. She closed her eyes. Outside, Seoul blazed. Inside, Kang Min-jun, who hadn't slept well since he was 22 years old, sat in the Silver City light with his hand warm on her ankle, and felt, for the first time in a very long time, enough. Red heart. End of Season 1. 2 weeks became 2 months. 2 months became a question. The question was, how do you love someone? When both of your worlds are built to keep people out. Season 2. Coming when you least expect it. Like her. Like him. Like all the best things. Fire, you stayed till the end. You already know what that means. Subscribe.